you can have different experiences, different backgrounds, and different journeys, and still find the silver lining.
It doesn't matter what you look like. It doesn't matter how old you are or what race you are or what gender you are. People are people, and they need to stand up for each other.
This is where it all begins, so say goodbye to all your fears, all your doubts. This is where they die. This is where we come to win, we come to fly. This is where we make our dreams come to life. Welcome to Innovation City.
Welcome to Innovation City, a podcast featuring innovators, disruptors, and creators who are breaking through the status quo to change the way business happens today. Hi, I'm Tyler Kelly and my co-host Michael Johnson, and we're from Slam Agency in St. Louis, and we're fortunate to be in Miami, Florida tonight at Venture Cafe in the CIC building in Wynwood. And Venture Cafe is the largest Thursday gathering of innovators who are making things happen in the world.
Wow.
And we're super stoked to have Christine Handy and Jim St. Germain with us tonight. This is going to be an exciting night.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure having both of you. This is it's a pleasure having two guests at the same time. So I'm start with Jim. Jim is the co-founder at Preparing Leaders of Tomorrow, or PLOT. So Jim has worked with juvenile justice involved youth and their families in New York City. He's on the board of the National Juvenile Defender Center, was recently appointed by former President Barack Obama to the Coordinator Council on Juvenile and Justice Delinquency Prevention. Previously, Jim was a youth care worker at a juvenile facility where he once had a resident. And Jim has worked with countless local, state, and federal officials advising on matters related to juvenile justice, mentoring, mental health, substance abuse, and educational issues.
So Christine is a wife and mother in Miami, and you've had an amazing career as a model, both national and international. You began modeling at age 11 in St. Louis, Missouri. That's our hometown connection right there.
Okay.
And you've done some amazing work, and then at some point, you had a series of health crises, including breast cancer. And since then, you've devoted your life to sharing your journey with others while educating and consoling them. And you've also authored a book, Walk Beside Me. And Jim, you've authored a book too, A Stone of Hope.
Yes, sir.
And somehow you guys found each other, right? Like, so that we got to get it started at the very beginning. Like, how'd that happen?
Shall you take a stab at it?
Well, I am a big believer in reading. And whenever I see a celebrity start a book club, I try to message them. And so Devon Kennard of the NFL, New York Giants.
He's a linebacker for the New York Giants.
He's a linebacker for the New York Giants. And he started a book club called
Reading with DK.
DK,
Yeah.
right. Reading with DK. And so I messaged him and I said, good for you. Thank you for that. Because we as authors and parents, we want our youth to read. And so he messaged me back and I said, well, I'd like to send you my book. And I figured, well, maybe he'd give it to his mother or something. And so I sent him my book. And then one day I was at home in Miami and I opened up my Instagram and I was tagged on Devon Kennard's Instagram post.
Wow.
And he had posted my book with Jim St. Germain's book and a little candle. And Jim reached out to me, and I'll let you take it from here.
Yeah, so it was happening at the same time. I read an article that was written about Devon from the New York Times, and it was pretty much about his reading initiative. And it was profound because books changed my life. When I read my first book at the age of 17. And I knew that literature allows young people, particularly young people who are going through a really rough time, to live vicariously through some of the things and some of the people they want to become like. So when I saw that, I was like, man, this is awesome. A lot of athletes usually make their money, drive their fast cars, and say good luck with society. The fact that he was doing that, and it was around the time of the so-called kneeling controversy, I wrote him on Instagram, told him, look, I really love the work you're doing. I love this initiative. Can I send you a book? And he wrote me back right away and said, sure, send me a book. And we were just doing that in different cities, different backgrounds at the same time. He received both books simultaneously and then posted them on Instagram, tagged her and myself. Then I just started following her.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
And so Jim reached out to me, and then I was going up to New York because I have one of my doctors is in New York, and so we got together one time and then another time, and we decided that it was no accident that our books were posted at the same time, and so we've joined forces, better together and stronger together, to get our missions out there.
There are no accidents, right?
Not at all.
No.
And the timing was also important, right? It was around the time again of that back and forth between the president and the NFL players.
Okay.
And it was a time of great division. So I figured, here's this model-looking white woman from a whole different world I may not know, but what if I reach out to her and perhaps see if we can get to know each other? Would that be a small part of what we need to do as a country to come closer to each other? So that was also a part of my thoughts when I saw that post. Yeah.
Oh, that's great. Fine. So this common theme that we hear sometimes is that understanding a different world helps you understand people, helps you to solve issues. So
Exactly right.
and you talked about having like a common mission. So what is that common mission that you're trying to accomplish?
I think that as you've talked about earlier, as a society, as a country, I think we usually do not get involved in issues until they're on our doorsteps. And I find that to be problematic. I think that we should care about each other's issues beyond our own bubbles, right? And so I felt that getting together with Christine again, we look so different, come from different places, that may be a part of the solution. And therefore, it's a part of our goal, not only to share our journeys, but to show other people that you can have different experiences, different backgrounds, and different journeys, and still find the silver lining in both stories, and then try to bring that message to a wider audience as a way of bringing them together.
Well, plus both of our books, while very different, and the backgrounds are different, and what happened to us are very different. An underlying message in both of our books are the reason we are both here is because of the people that stood up for us and never forsake us. And so we want to talk about how you need to really have people surround you that are going to be there for you, not just through the short haul, but through the long haul. And what does that mean? And it means it doesn't matter what you look like. It doesn't matter how old you are or what race you are or what gender you are. People are people, and they need to stand up for each other. And it transcends beyond my small journey or Jim's small journey. It transcends as a nation. We all need to be standing up for each other.
So, just listening to a little bit of each of your stories and reading a little bit about each of those, the people that stood up for you, it was different circumstances, but obviously different people too. So maybe talk a little bit about those relationships and how they impacted you, and how, like, together, those experiences make what you're doing.
Right. So for me, I grew up without my mother. My mother left the family at a very young age. My dad was extremely abusive, and he was an alcoholic. He struggled with alcoholic issues, and he was very physical and violent. So he used to beat us as a kid. And I have 14 brothers and sisters, and my mother came from sort of like a different background as my father, and my dad used to also beat her. So eventually she ended up leaving the family at a very young age, and that was in Haiti. I was born in Haiti. I moved here when I was about 10 years old. And so not growing up without a mother felt like I was missing the loving and the nurturing part. And what I've learned as a young man is that hurt people hurt people. If you're hurting, you're more likely to pass that pain on to someone else, right? A lot of the things we're seeing happen in our society now, usually people who are hurting, whether it's coming from a place of hate or something, there's something happening within them that's painful, and they want other people to feel that. So I think that was perhaps a part of my struggles as a young man in Brooklyn. But when I realized that there were other people who weren't family members, who didn't know me, didn't look like me, right? Like I had a Jewish mentor. I had a short Italian woman who was a teacher of mine who looked out for me. I had a big, tall guy with dreads who stood up for me. I had like a Muslim guy that I live in a place with who helped me. I had a Latina woman who was like a mentor to me, literally. I feel like the entire world was stepping in and helping me. So that kind of experience then opened up your mind to, wow, you know what? There are beautiful people in every corner of the world, regardless of what they look like, the religions, creed, whatever it may be. And so that contributed to how I view the world and how I try to connect with people, even though we may not look alike, not from the same socioeconomic backgrounds or race or whatever it may be. So that was the thing that kind of, I think, translate.
Well, and for me, the people in my life that stood by me all looked like me, and they all came. We all lived in the same environment, and I grew up in St. Louis, and it's pretty, cookie cutter. And then I moved to Dallas, and it's also very cookie cutter. And I was a model for 30 years, and we kind of all looked like each other too. And so when I went through all these health issues, the people that stood by me were. They were similar people, and they all stood by me, but what they taught me was self-worth and self-esteem and self-love. And that self-worth and that self-esteem and that self-love for me translated into becoming a non-judgmental person and becoming more open to how other people feel and to other people's circumstances, and it wasn't just about me anymore. And they gave me the ability to look beyond my small world that I was living in. In fact, one of the reasons why I moved to Miami was because I was living in such a small, one-dimensional environment. And Miami is a melting pot of people, and I wanted to be in a melting pot of people because that's the reality that we live in, and that's a beautiful part of the reality we live in. I want to be in that, and I want my kids to see that. And so, just because the people that stood by me looked like me, they taught me that. We have these bigger issues. We need to talk about equality, and we need to talk about, what's gender issues and all these other issues. So,
was there some sort of defining moment that kind of pushed you out of your comfort zone of all these people look like me and I need to expand out a little bit?
There was a lot of defining moments, actually. I had my first major health battle at 35, and then I had another one at 41, and then I was diagnosed with breast cancer at 42. And I think if I had learned the lessons at the first health battle at 35, I may not have gone through the other two.
By the way, she looks 21, so I'm trying to figure this out. Keep going.
But I guess God thought I needed a little bit more pushing to change me. And Jim and I have talked about this 5 years ago. I don't know that I would have wanted to get into his story and really understand where he came from and how he feels. Because maybe I would have put him in a box, right? This is what he looks like. This is where I think label him. And I don't want anybody to label me. And who am I to judge anybody else, right? Nobody knows what other people go through. Nobody knows what goes on in other people's houses. Why should I do that? So my perception now is so different than, that person that I was before I went through all these health issues. And I think part of going through all those health issues makes you realize, how truly blessed life is. Everybody's life.
So you talked about learning lessons. Like, what were some of those lessons that it took you a few experiences to actually accept?
That's a good question. I actually, when I was diagnosed with breast cancer, I had to figure out who I really was because my whole life was dependent on what I look like. Starting to model at a young age and being labeled as this beautiful model, I thought that was fulfilling. And along with that became other issues I would say that I was going through. I was a consumer and I wanted to look a certain way. Even if I walked out of the house to go to the grocery store, I needed to present a certain way. And so when I lost my hair and my eyelashes and my eyebrows and I was 90 some odd pounds, I had to really look inside and go, who is this girl? Who is Christine Handy? And I used to take a picture of myself as a child, and I used to look at that picture and go, what do I want for this girl? Who do I want to be for this girl? And so when I got my health back and I was able to stand on my own 2 feet, I decided, well, if I'm going to be standing, I need to stand for something, right? And so I stood for what I am now is totally different than I was back then. I was satisfied with that bubble. I was satisfied with that consumption. And I was satisfied, looking in the mirror and feeling like that was enough for me, even though really I was dead inside.
Right. What's interesting with that is, and we haven't touched on this, but as I'm listening to Christine, and this is not from a negative standpoint, but I think that the very same thing I believe plagues a lot of communities is the fact that there are times where there are individuals, perhaps like the old Christine, who is not consuming or as concerned with the world and the outside environment, right? Because I think that one of the solutions is to care about issues beyond our own spaces. And so that turnaround, I think, to where she is now as a person, I think is more so of a part of the solutions where we need to go than the opposite of that. And so it doesn't surprise me that now it's this very same thing that brought us together. But sometimes in life, we have to then go through a journey in order to get there. We all don't always get it right away. Sometimes it's not taught to you. You don't fully understand that and pick it up. So I think that is extremely powerful.
Well, that's part of our mission, right? So that people don't have to go through the brink of death to get to where I am today.
Exactly.
That's what we're trying to teach people.
That was what I was going to ask. It's like, you don't want to end up in a boys' home or end up on your deathbed to figure this out. Right?
That's exactly right. I mean, for me also is as a young black man growing up in this country and in an urban environment, every day you're trying to survive. Like literally, it's a survival of the fittest. There's violence, there's poverty, there's so many things. And so you're consumed with surviving, and sometimes surviving means doing things perhaps that harms other people, if it means that you get to live. So, being outside of that, going beyond that, looking at the entire picture is very much that solution. And also me saying to not just young people who are on the brinks of falling through the cracks, but also to the larger society that, hey, why don't we step in, care, invest, provide the resources before certain things occur, right? Whether it's current issues like mass shootings, right? Mostly perpetrated by young men. Or whether it's the violence that's plaguing the streets of Chicago, or whether it's homelessness or poverty or cancer or whatever it may be. If we start to care about these issues beyond our own world, then we have a better chance of being a part of the solution.
The unique thing about both of you is that you had people in your lives, and you recognized and you accepted their help. What about the people that, number one, don't recognize it, or that might just think that there's no one like that in my life?
We're going to fight for this question. We are going to fight for this question because we both have such a good answer. In both of our books, we talk about, and this is an interesting point in the beginning of both of our books, it's so difficult. It was so difficult for me to ask for help, and it was so difficult for me to accept help. Same with Jim, but for different reasons. And my issue with asking for help was pride. And I'll let Jim talk about his issue for asking help. But once you get to a point where you have no choice, because it was a life or death situation, I had to have help, and I had to have a lot of help. Your pride gets in check, and that's not a bad thing to go through. But you're right. There's a lot of people out there that they don't want to accept help, or they don't know how to ask for help, and that's something that we do need to talk about, because we as a community, whether it be these bigger issues or the smaller issues, we need to talk about that. We need to band together to help people always.
Yeah, so as Christine mentioned, there's strength in vulnerability. I believe when you're vulnerable and seek help and willing to admit faults and bounce back, then you have control over the narrative. Someone else don't control that. For me in particular, I grew up in an environment where your ability to instill fear in other people was an asset. It allowed people not to bother you and mess with you. So seeking help would then make you look the opposite of that, like you're weak. So whatever you needed, you had to go and find a way to get it yourself. Now what happens is a lot of times in these neighborhoods, high level of poverty, there is nothing around. So you end up hurting each other for crumbs because a young person in such challenging environment with an underdeveloped brain cannot become what they can't see. So for me, though, the individuals who stepped in and provided a path and a light and showed me that I can become anything that I wanted to become as long as I put in the work and make the connections I needed to make. They were the vessels. And my book, actually, one of the things I fight for is for people to recognize just that. I don't want people to look at the story and say, well, you was a special person and you made it out, so now great, everybody else should be able to pull themselves by their bootstraps. What I want people to understand is that not everyone has a bootstrap. Some people don't even have a shoes on. And I think it's our duty as a responsibility as a society to lend them a helping hand. We don't have to walk them all the way, but give them some hope, give them some resources and opportunities. So for me, this book is a call to action for all of us to realize that we can be the Marty Feynman, the Christine Bellas, the Teacher Olio, the Waltons, all of the individuals who were there for me. Each of us can be that for someone else. You can be a mentor for a young man on a particular side of St. Louis, right, who's maybe seeking a way out. Or Christine can be the mentor for a young woman who's seeking or struggling with her image and self-worth and so on and so on. So I want the book to highlight just that Jim didn't make it here because somehow he was special. Mm-hmm. Jim made it here because there were individuals who realized that there was something in him and they were willing to fight for that.
And so the call to action is for people in the community to get off the couch, right, and go help somebody.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right, and make a difference. And sometimes,
even if it doesn't just directly affect them, that's what we're talking about.
Right.
And
it may not be an issue that just directly affects you, but
right. Learn about an issue. Right. And take initiative. Mm-hmm. Someone once said that love is an action verb. Right. So if you're loving other people, you're showing appreciation and humanity, then you're also doing things to make the world a better place. Things don't just get better by themselves, right? When we fall asleep, that's when we're reminded that, you know what, maybe we may be taking things for granted.
So how does somebody start? Somebody listening, like what's the first step somebody can do to help somebody?
So a part of what I've created as my call to action is every city I go to, I learn about a small organization on the ground doing work either with at-risk youth, with families who are in the foster care system, or families who are simply seeking a way out. So I have different organizations that I work with and support. One of them is my own. I've co-founded a nonprofit organization, Plot for Youth. It stands for Preparing Leaders of Tomorrow. And so what we do is we provide mentoring, college and job preparation to at-risk youth throughout Brooklyn, right? So that's specifically towards New York City. But they are a mentoring organization in every city in America that someone can sign up with to become a mentor, volunteer with, or make a donation to. The other organization I work with very closely is the National Juvenile Defenders Center. The National Juvenile Defenders Center provides attorneys for young people who are in trouble with the law and do not have the money. A lot of states, although constitutionally they're supposed to provide attorneys, but a lot of states, there are loopholes to not to do it. So for example, in New Orleans, 50% of the folks who sometimes, again, these are not violent crimes. Sometimes people just make mistakes. They go in front of a judge. They don't have an attorney. And they represent themselves. They don't know anything about the law, so they get the raw side of the deal. So the National Juvenile Defenders Center helps with that. They are a mentoring organization, again, all over the country. There are after-school programs where young people may be coming from broken homes but looking for someone to maybe help walk them through their math homework or take them to a Dolphins game, even if they sit in the nosebleed areas, or a Cardinals game, and show them that, you know, you can have a good time and that you can perhaps reach your potentials at some point. I think these are very important things we can do, but just learn about an issue that perhaps is not close to you all the time. And again, another great way to do that is to get a copy of this book, mine and Christine's, Walk Beside Me, and A Stone of Hope. I think it's a blueprint
Let me see that.
It's a blueprint for us getting to where we need to get to.
So for those of you who are watching on either YouTube or iTunes video,
right,
you'll be able to see these. And you know, oh, there you go. It's interesting to me that you both chose to, you know, turn this into a story as opposed to like a biography, right? So like explain like that, like your
Well, mine's a fiction.
yeah.
But it really is more of a memoir. But we changed the cities and the characters' names. And I got to play with it a little bit and use my creative brain instead of just being everything completely accurate. But most of it is accurate. And so for me, that was part of my artistic expression, was to change it a little bit. But Jim's is a memoir.
Yeah, so mine
Wow,
is a
okay.
memoir. Everything in the book is exactly how it
100%.
has 100%
No
how it
names
happened.
have been changed.
Well, a few names.
Okay.
That's the only thing. So, for example, that's a good question. So, for example, if there were like an incident that occurred that may still be a problem, where that person say, "Hey, you using my name here, that's defamation of character,"
Exactly.
and it wasn't my choice. The publisher, you know how the publishing houses, they're like, "Look, you know, I think we should change that name," and I wasn't happy about it. I wanted to keep all the names how they were, but I think they made the right call. So I changed about 3 names in the book. That's about it. Everything else is exactly how it happened. Yeah.
And it's your first book. How long did it take you to write it?
About 1.5 years. I didn't start out as a writer, which was interesting. So I got help editing the book. But when you're writing from the heart, when you're writing to make a difference, it's bigger than yourself. You understand that there is power in words. Words matter. What we say to people, how we share our vulnerabilities, and how open we're willing to be with other people can make a difference. So I wanted to be as honest and as authentic in this book, and I think I've done that. And I think that particularly when you're talking about folks who are going through hardships, the more honest you are with them, the more likely you're able to reach them.
How about you? This book is, how many years ago did you write this?
2 years ago.
Okay.
It was, I first actually self-published it because I didn't want anybody to change it. And then I was approached by a publisher about a year after that. It took me about 9 months to write.
Wow.
But it was republished by a publisher, Morgan James, out of New York. So it's been in its second publishing. And I actually wrote a second book, and it took me about 4 months. So I've cut the time in half. That has not been published yet because I've been working so diligently on this one as well as my speaking that I haven't had time to publish my second book, but that's coming.
So for those people who aren't writers, like you say, 1.5 years, 9 months.
Well, and neither of us were writers before this.
But you are now.
But we are now.
What's that mean to somebody that like they're thinking, well, I might want to write a book? Is that like 9 straight months, or like how many hours a day?
It varies, right? So for example, right now I'm working on some other projects, and writing is an interesting thing. There are times where you're feeling something, you're in the flow, and you're just going right. And then there are times you get writer's block. You're like, I'm stuck. And you need to kind of take a step back, go for a walk, do something else, and then come back to it. But writing is also a very therapeutic process, but it can also be a process that sort of like stir up some memories and painful experiences you've had. But for me, I think that as a young man, I was very physical, right? So when I felt things, I wanted to express it by being violent. And fight and get into things that would cost me more. Nowadays, when I feel things, I write about it. Even if I go through a breakup and I'm hurting, I'm like, you know what, let me write about this process because it helps me to get it out. And at times, as you're getting it out, you realize that, like, wait, this can actually make a difference to someone else. I want to tell this story. And I think as an artist, it comes to you naturally where when you experience things, if you ask most artists, the things they write about, the things they produce are things that they usually feel and want to share that experience with other people.
The only time I ever get distracted when I'm writing is if some issue comes up with my children. But other than that, I can write for hours. But I think that's such a personal thing. I get up in the morning and I don't write, but by the afternoon I want to sit down and stay focused, and I can write through dinner, and I won't even I'm not even hungry. But I think different artists do their crafts differently. I have other friends that are writers, and they are very specific. They write for 3 hours a day at certain times. That wasn't me. But I also would write into the night, and that was comforting to me. Especially our stories are so big. I don't know if you all have read anything about our stories. Our stories are so big. You can't believe either one of us is actually sitting here with you talking. And so we put so much into these stories that we had a life-giving force to help us through it.
Yeah.
And there was a reason that we wrote these stories. It was too big of a story not to.
Right. Yeah.
So it was very easy to write the story.
Right. See, for me, the other thing is I struggle with, I think I have ADD or ADHD something. So sometimes it's hard for me to stay focused. So I may start writing and then something happened. I'm like, oh, okay, I'm completely off of it. So I got to find my focus to come back, which is all good because sometimes people will come up to me and say, well, I want to write, but I'm struggling with such and such. And I'm like, man, just write, don't worry about that. Even if you have some sort of diagnose or whatever, just try to do as much as you can, as often as you can, and eventually you look back and you're like, oh, it's been a year and I have 200 pages, right? And so it's a process, a day at a time.
But I would say anybody who wants to write a book, and I hear people say that all the time, I want to write a book, I want to write a book. Everybody's got a story.
Right.
Everybody wants to write a book. I would say just start. If you stop and you can't do it, you weren't meant to do it, but just start.
So, I don't want to miss what's happening between the two of you,
Right.
and your greater purpose. So I don't think we've talked about that yet. So let's talk about you have Plot and you have the organizations that you're supporting, but now together, what's that bigger vision?
Well, there's a lot of visions here, but we look very different. If you're just listening, you don't see that. We are different ages. We come from harrowingly different backgrounds. And the fact that we're together is pushing boundaries and pushing limits and showing the world that it does not matter race, sex, anything. You can move mountains with anybody, and anybody. You can form alliances. You should. You can't just do that, but you should form alliances with people that don't look like you. Why? Because it doesn't matter, right? And so we're trying to break down boundaries, and we're trying to go out there and say to the world, we're here because of the way people saved our lives, including the service that we're doing, the missions that we're on. They're life-giving forces to ourselves. We're not giving up. This is what we're doing. These are our missions in life.
And look, I'll be very candid. We have a very tough history in this country, right? And a big part of our challenge sometimes is we're not willing to acknowledge that side of our history. We take ownership of all the beautiful things, and but we're not willing to acknowledge some of our faults. And so I think right now, as a country, we're very divided. I mean, let's be honest. We can't even speak to each other, right? The left, the right, the middle. There's a lot of hate. It's in your face. It's everywhere. And it's harmful. It's detrimental. I think we can disagree on ideological differences in politics and policies, but still not hate each other's existence. And I feel like we are at that point now in this country. And so I believe a part of the solution is this dynamic in this relationship. The fact that coming from such polar opposite background, that we can still get together and try to use our vision and experiences and stories to uplift humanity. I think that is telling. I think that it's something that we can use very much so all the time, but particularly right now as a nation. Because I think we're stronger together.
Stronger together. That's a good place to be.
Yes, sir.
What's the future look like when those barriers are broken down? I was reading. Let's see. Let me pull this up.
Right.
It's from the A Stone of Hope, a rallying cry.
Right.
I highlighted this section.
Right.
No one is who they are going to be. So what does the country look like? So let's take it like this.
Yeah.
The country is not what it's going to be, right? Tell me about that.
That's a great question.
You're good, Tyler. That's a powerful question. I think that, look, the beauty of America, if you ask me, look, as a young black man, there's a lot of things that I deal with in this country that is painful to deal with, frustrating, and overwhelming at times. But at the same time, I also experience a lot of beauty, right? I meet people from all over this country at times, and they surprise me of how kind and how open they are. And I think there is more of that in us than the other side. I think that no one came into this world hating people. I think that for many of us, it was taught. So if anything that could be giving to you can also be taking away, and we can be retrained, and we can look forward to celebrating the differences instead of hating them. So the country, I think right now, though, there are times where in life in general, you sometimes have to take a step backward than to take 10 forward. Now, some people may say that, well, we are in a perfect direction right now. And for those individuals, that may be true for them. But it doesn't mean that other people may not feel the opposite, and those people should also be listened to, right? The same way I think that perhaps prior with the last administration, some people feel like this is not the country I envisioned. And those people should also be listened to, because we are a diverse country, and that's not going to change. We're going to be diverse forever. That's what makes us the country that everyone wants to get to. And there's so many beautiful people here. So I think that we've have a strong history, but we still have a long way to go, and that it's our duty to work on the small things every day to make it better.
And it's our obligation to understand, for instance, me to understand where Jim's coming from, and for Jim to understand where I'm coming from, because certainly from a paper standpoint, we don't understand each other. Right. But that's what we're calling people to do. Reach out to people that you don't understand, that don't look like you. Why? Because that's important. Try to understand each other and not label them and put them in a box. Right. And so that's what we're doing. And
there's a conservative columnist by the name of David Brooks who writes for the New York Times, and he appears on PBS News every night. Him and Mark Schild involved in these great civil discourse, which I enjoy watching, sometimes from opposite side of the aisle, but there's always mutual respect there. And one of the things David Brooks talked about, he wrote a book about it, is there are two virtues in life. There is the resume things that we have that we can write about, that can make us look good on paper, and there's the moral part of who we are. And what he says is that when you are no longer here, when it's your time to say bye to this place, at your funeral, they will not be reading the resume virtues. They'll be reading the moral ones, the one that contributed to how you made other people feel, how you treated other people. And there are a lot of us who may have the resume part figured out. We look great on paper. We can get any job. We are doing well financially. We are the American dream. But I don't think that's the end of be all. I don't think that it's a zero-sum game. I think that it's good to have that level of success, but the moral part, how we treat each other and how we want to see other people enjoy that same level of success, to me, is what defines us as a society.
And if we've learned anything today, it's about if you've reached some measure of success, turn around and give it away.
Give it back.
Right?
That's exactly right. Find your gift and give it away. That's what people have done for me, for Christine, and we're obligated to do the same for someone else. And we're doing it, whether it's through these books, talking, getting to know other people, sitting here with you guys. Again, both of you may have total opposite backgrounds as the two of us, right? But this discussion, I think, may bring us closer together than anything. I may come to St. Louis, to
go to the Cardinals game.
Exactly, to see the Cardinals get beat by my Yankees, and then stop by your house for some wine.
There you go.
So it's awesome.
Well, I'll tell you what, Jim, Christine, this has been enlightening, to say the least, right? Thank you both for being here. tell us how Jim first, and then Christine, how people can get your books and how they can like connect with you and social and all those good things.
Yeah. So my book is available literally everywhere books are sold. Barnes and Noble. Every local bookstore should have them. If you walk in a bookstore they don't, you can just ask them to order A Stone of Hope. If you want to support Jeff Bezos, which I heard he's worth about $121 billion now, just came out. You can also get it through Amazon. So it's literally available everywhere. It's A Stone of Hope by Jim St. Germain. And I'll tell you quickly, Tyler, Christine, if you don't mind, is that
No, please.
the title of my book came from one of my favorite speeches by Dr. King. I don't know if you've ever been to his monument in Washington, D.C., but if you walk there, on the side of Dr. King's monument on Capitol Hill, there's a quote that says, "Out of a mountain of despair, a stone of hope." And I actually saw that quote while I was on Capitol Hill working on changing some of these criminal justice laws. And there was a bill we were supporting that failed in the Senate, never even made it out of the committee. And I was a young man and enthusiastic, and I couldn't believe why anyone would want to be against children. And so I took a walk, and I decided I was going to walk to the monument. When I got there, I saw this quote, and it kind of jolted me. It uplifted me a little bit, and that's how I came up with the title of the book, A Stone of Hope.
Wow.
Yeah.
Walk Beside Me, my book is basically everywhere as well. Barnes & Noble, Amazon. I usually feed people to Amazon because it's so fast and easy. But I enjoy Instagram as well. And my Instagram handle is chandy71. And my website is www.christinehandy.com.
Same for me. JimSt.Germain.com, plotforyouth.org, Jim St. Germain on Facebook, Jim St. Germain 89 on Twitter, since we now follow each other.
Awesome.
So holla at me. I'm everywhere.
I will, definitely.
Thank you, fellas.
Thank you.
Well, Christine, Jim, it was a pleasure hearing your stories tonight.
For more episodes, visit innovationcity.co and be sure to subscribe, rate, and review. If you're in Miami, visit us at Venture Cafe on Thursday nights. You can find details at venturecafemiami.org and connect with us on social at We Are Slam and Venture Cafe MIA.
This is where it all begins.